Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Paul Hallett. I'm president of the British Society of Soil Science, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our 8th webinar of the year, which happens to be in partnership with the Ecological Continuity Trust. So just before I welcome the presenters, I just want to introduce the British Society of Soil Science as one of the hosts of the webinar today. So we're an established international membership organization and charity, and we're committed to the study of soil in its widest aspects. We have a broad audience of members, everyone from scientists and academia through to a growing membership amongst practitioners, teachers, and anyone implementing soil science in industry or government or just with an interest in soils. So there are 8 webinars planned for this year. So keep an eye out on our website for further details. But just before we begin, I just want to provide some basic housekeeping. So there's many of you here today, and all of your microphones have been muted. We're going to be taking questions just at the end of the presentation, but we're going to monitor them throughout. So there is a chat box that you can go to answer the questions, and we'll look at those and start to field them, and that'll start at about 1:20. So please put those through as they come up, just so we can look at those. Today's presentation has been awarded BASIS and NRO SO CPD points. If you're registered with either body, please contact us directly after the event. And finally, please be aware that we are recording today's presentation. So as I mentioned, the webinar is being organized in partnership with the BSSS Corporate Member, the Ecological Continuity Trust, or ECT. ECT is a unique charity dedicated to preserving the national resources or national resource of long-term ecological field experiments across the UK and harnessing data for evidence-based policy making, sustainable land use, and education, and cutting-edge science too. So at this point, I would like to invite their executive director, who is Ben Sykes, who's going to provide you with an introduction to the organization and also an introduction to the webinar today. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my job to give you a brief introduction to ECT and set the scene for the main 2 speakers in our webinar, Harry and Catherine, who you'll be hearing from very shortly. So the ECT, as we're known, was set up in 2008. We are a registered charity and also a not-for-profit company as well, registered with Companies House. So this is our broad vision for the charity, and I think we still believe with evidence that we are unique in the UK. We are the only organisation of any type solely dedicated to championing, preserving and maintaining long-term experiments, ecological field experiments across all 4 countries of the UK. So LTEs, long-term experiments, are outdoor real-world experiments that manipulate key variables and seek over the long term to understand the changes that we see in landscapes under those manipulation of variables, and also to look at the drivers of those changes. And the sorts of things that long-term experiments monitor and study in response to the manipulation of variables are things like species composition, abundance, growth. That relates largely to plants, but it also covers invertebrates as well on experimental field plots. So ECT does not just accept any old experiment onto the register. We are a serious scientific organisation. We have a screening system with 12 criteria, and we must have sites on the register that are controlled, replicated, and manipulative. There are some exceptions to that for experiments that have been running over a century before modern statistics got going, but from this point forward, we expect experiments admitted to the register largely to follow these criteria and have standard controls and replicates. By long term, we mean 6 years. So to be admitted to our register, a site must have 6 years of treatments at least at the time of survey, or guaranteed funding for at least 6 years into the future. And on our database, there are sites at all stages of their life cycle, and I'll come on to mention the number that are currently active and undergoing treatments in a moment. So the experiment types supported on our register fall within these 6 main areas. And so very shortly, you're going to be hearing from Harry, particularly on land management as a driver at the North Wyke Farm Platform. And some of them even address multiple drivers, so more than one of the top 5 in the list there. So we have over 80 experiments on the National Register, as you can see, across all 4 nations of the UK. Of those, 38 are currently active, and those are the ones that you see here in the blue diamonds. Down here, if you can see my mouse pointer, this is North Wyke in Devon, not far from Oakhampton, to put it firmly on the map, and that's the experiment you'll be hearing about shortly from Harry. So the experiments cover a wide range of habitats. The majority are probably grassland, but we have everything from peat bog experiments down to freshwater catchment scale experiments. And you can see a couple of examples of each of those habitat types here. And so the main reason for holding this webinar in partnership with the BS Cubed is that we at the charity feel that this is a largely untapped resource for soil scientists. So these are bona fide research sites with a PI, and some of them, ostensibly led by the PI who has a soil science bent, do incorporate significant soil science, but a lot of them don't. And so we're quite keen through our partnership with BS Cube to see these sites used more by soil scientists. And when you think about what's on offer, we think they're quite attractive to soil scientists. So many of these, the soils under these plots in these experiments have lain undisturbed for decades, in a couple of cases more than a century. And a lot of the treatments are largely restricted to above ground vegetation. And so you have these undisturbed soils over a long time frame that have been responding to above ground treatments. And so we think it's a significant resource, and we welcome soil scientists coming to use our sites. And indeed, when you get in touch with a PI, you will find you're pushing at an open door, generally speaking. So let's have more of the sort of thing that's going on at North Wyke and Colt Park and Buxton, where soil science has a strong presence. So just to give you a feel for the longevity, the grandfather of them all is Park Grass, now 169 years and running, right down to the youngest, which is the CO2 elevation experiment in Staffordshire at Byford Face of 8 years. And you can see that the North Wyke Farm Platform in Devon sits at 14 years and still going. And you can see how that fits into some of the decade-long experiments that ECT has on its register. So in a moment, you'll be hearing from Harry, and Catherine, who is linked with Pasture for Life, will speak about end users' perspectives on what's happening at the North Wyke platform and implications for farmers and how you speak to farmers. And just to finish, Paul, here's a slide on the main activities. We're largely funded through 2 sources. Sizable grants from organisations like ESME and the BES, but also private donations as well. And those are our 2 main sources of income. We're largely about saving LTEs for the nation and preserving them, but also about establishing new platforms. And a lot of our charitable objectives are based around science communication. And one of the things that we've been doing at ECT is rendering experiments in virtual reality so that people can experience them in 360 immersive VR wherever they are. And we take these headsets to our events. And the most recent one we completed was indeed North Wyke. So we have rendered North Wyke in VR. So if you're intrigued by what you hear from Harry, you can either arrange a visit to the site or you could try out the headset at one of the events that ECT attends, because we make these available everywhere. And with that, I think I'll stop sharing and it's back to you, Paul.
Great. Thank you very much, Ben. That was fascinating and considerably valuable to soil science. Just for people listening, we have a podcast called Soil Matters, and the last one actually featured Ben Sykes and Richard Bargett. talking about the ECT. So you can look at that on any podcast site. Just search on Soil Matters and you'll be able to find that podcast. So today our first presenter is Professor Paul Harris, commonly known as Harry, and he is a principal research scientist at Rothamsted Research. And he's going to speak on challenges facing long-term data platforms to inform on innovations in sustainable and resilient agriculture. So he has research interests in the development and application of statistical and mathematical models for spatio-temporal agroecological processes in terms of sustainable and resilient agriculture. So he's been a project lead for the North Wyke Farm Platform and National Bioscience Research Infrastructure since 2017. He's published over 100 peer-reviewed papers on a broad range of subjects as well. So I'll pass over to you, Harry.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the North Wyke Farm Platform and the challenges that we faced in basically keeping it running for the last 15 years. And it's quite a considerable challenges of keeping it running. The farm platform's a system scale experiment. So we look at systems. We've got 3 outdoor farms and 1 indoor farm currently. Just a note on the NBRIs at Rothamsted, the National Bioscience Research Infrastructure. So we've got the farm platform, which has been going since 2010. We've got the insect survey, which was established in 1964. Then we got the long-term experiments, established in 1843. And park grass is one of those long-term experiments, which is also part of ECT. Just for context, the overview, what are challenges that we faced due to climate change. So the farm platform is predominantly livestock farming. So in that respect, agriculture both contributes to climate change through livestock farming, the greenhouse gases, and of course is impacted by climate change due to things like extreme events, extreme rainfall and drought. In the context of Great Britain and the world, so 40% of Great Britain is grassland farming and 25% of the Earth's surface is also grasslands. So it's a very important land use. Some concepts that the farm platform has been looking at over the 15 years, predominantly sustainable farming, which looks at balancing and trade-offs, trade-offs sort of the productivity versus negative impacts due to pollution, emissions to air, emissions to water. But increasingly, or more recently, we've been looking at resilient farming, which is typically time series data, and see how farming is resilient to different stresses, single stresses, compound stresses, and looking for signs of collapse and slowing down. To be able to understand sustainable and resilient farming, or ensure sustainable and resilient farming, we need data. So let's move on to the data that we collect on the farm platform. So here it is. It's 3 outdoor farms and 1 indoor farm. So we currently, the 3 outdoor farms, 2 are livestock grassland farms and 1's an arable farm. And we got an indoor cattle farm. Back in 2010, all 3 outdoor farms were the same. They were all livestock farms and permanent pasture. And around 2013-14, 2 of the farms transitioned to improved pastures, both with high sugar grass, one with high sugar grass and clover. And then in 2019, 1 of the farms transitioned to arable. So periodically, every 5 or so years, we transition to a different land use or management system, and we're due for another one next year as it goes. So with these 3 outdoor farms and 1 indoor farm, we try to collect as much of the data of all the key processes of those farming systems. This data is made open as part of our grant, part of our funding. We make this data open, and the other important thing is that the farm platform itself is open for use as a facility. So researchers can come and use the farm platform to conduct an additional experiment as long as it doesn't compromise the overarching experiment. That's the key thing. So typically these additional experiments are, say, for just 1 season in 1 field of the farm platform, in 1 of the farms, or in a couple of the fields. And to date, there's been over 150 additional experiments. And to date, we've collected over 102 million measurements of all the component processes of those for farming systems. So here's the data. The first two columns are all open. So we've got detailed data on farm management events, crop performance, both from the arable crop and the grassland farms, livestock performance. We've got around met sites, we've got met data, we've got soil moisture, we've got water emissions. Water emissions are by far and away the jewel in the crown of the farm platform. We've got detailed water emissions, water runoff, water physics and water chemistry in each of the 3 outdoor farms. In each of they're divided into subcatchments, 5 subcatchments in each, and we've got detailed data from those subcatchments. We've got greenhouse gas emissions, not as good coverage as the water emissions, primarily due to expense. We've got eddy covariance towers for CO2 and CH4. We've also got indoor greenhouse gas capability measurements. And we also conduct soil and plant surveys. Currently, they're conducted every 3 months, quarterly, and we collect data on the soils and the pastures. We got more recently, we've upped our biodiversity measurements. So we've got quadrat surveys. We've also got bioacoustics sensors. We also do transects and traps, and also genomics. And then we've got remote sensing capability. We fly drones. We've got sensors on our forage and combine harvesters. And of course, we've always got the satellite data. So we look at those 3 columns there. The first 2 columns are all open. They're all available through our data portal. And then the third column to the right is a mixture of open and closed data. The idea is some of this closed data on the error collections are often from the sort of supplementary farm platform experiments, and eventually they become, some of them become core data, and we make them open, and sometimes release open data from an individual experiment. So it's an ongoing challenge releasing these other data, but our core focus is concentrating on those core collections, which is in itself is a quite significant task. And we also release some data sets that have been worked up in some manner from the core collections, say data that's been aggregated in some way, or infilled from missing values. And you see the links to the websites there, to our farm platform website, where you can see what's been going on the farm platform and how to download the data. Just a summary of how the geographies of the farm platform. Remember, we're just quite a small farms located in Devon. So most of our research is done at those four farm scales. But we do have the ability to outscale, because we also measure the catchment that the farm platform sits in. So if you look at those little yellow stars there, you can we monitor that too. So if we were just outscaling from the farm platform, we could influence about 5% of the UK. But when we couple the measurements that we can take from the catchment that the farm platform sits in, which has got more varied land use, we can outscale to about 40% of the UK. And when we're outscaling, typically we're combining our high resolution data from the farm platform plus models plus data at the landscape scale, typically remote sensing data or national surveys and other networks of experimental sites. Whenever we change a system, pasture or land use, there's always we also have an associated hypotheses for each period. So we've got hypotheses for the baseline period, the first system change period, and also the second system change period. And those are the main hypotheses there. I won't go through them, but we've also got a collection of sub-hypotheses. Just a slide on the soil collections. So recently we've upped our soil moisture capacity. It used to be only 15 soil moisture sensors across the 3 outdoor farms. Now we've got 60. It's 3 per field. So we've got 20 fields on the farm platform across 15 subcatchments. I'm on about subcatchments because that's how we capture all the water runoff. So these so that captures the water runoff. We've got a clay layer that's close to the surface, so none of the water goes to groundwater. So that's our soil moisture capacity. We also do surveys. Originally, we were doing within-field surveys in the first years of the farm platform, but they were quite resource intensive. So in 2018, we moved to quarterly surveys, but we bulked them. So we get 20 measurements because we've got 20 fields every 3 months, and we measure 27 soil parameters. We also complement these collections with drone surveys. And we've also always got the satellite data too. The 6 soil classes across the 3 outdoor farms, and have the house style class dominates. What's been increasingly important and valuable from the farm platform for its 15 years of operation is that we've got very detailed management data, which is increasingly unique and valuable, and that provides context to whatever happens on the farm, on the North Wyke Farm Platform, coupled with the Met data. Right, some science snippets, quite a few publications over the 15 years, papers on trade-offs, our transition from a grassland farm to an arable farm. Does it make sense where we're located in southwest England? Papers on livestock KPIs, quite a few papers on greenhouse gas emissions, and also on water emissions, specifically soil erosion, soil loss. Also a few papers on livestock nutrition. So those are just snippets of the science, more science publications. Increasingly, because we've got quite rich data sets, we're doing more digital modeling papers. So what we've also got good capacity for, so not only can we measure all many of the component processes, but we can't measure anything, so we can complement our measurements with simulations from process-based models, simply because we can't measure everything. And even the things that we can measure are often too expensive. So we've got that capacity too, so that complements our measurements, simulations from process-based models. And there's some analytical snippets of modeling and sort of data-driven models, process-based models, and both these two snippets here are combined with remote sensing for carbon dynamics. And also done some work on sensor design, where to ideally place sensors. I won't go into detail on this slide, but this is the ideal location for soil moisture sensors at different spatial scales. So given that we've got really rich data sets, we've got capacity to do models, both process-based and data-driven, it's quite a sort of no-brainer in a way to sort of use the farm platform to demonstrate digital twin technologies, which are just decision support tools where you do forecasts, but those forecasts have the ability to update in some manner, but also influence how you collect the data. So just some concepts on digital twins. Digital model a digital model can be used as a decision support tool to help the farmer decide on what to do next on his or her farm. But there's no interaction with the farm itself, or very little interaction. A digital shadow is more, say the farmer's got quite good sensing capacity and collects a lot of data. And these are more, so you can make forecasts of more data-driven models and process-based models, but you still don't interact fully back with the real system, the physical system. A digital twin does. It's got good, strong communication between the virtual system, which is the digital twin, and the actual physical system, typically of where and when and what to collect with respect to this data and what is the most important data to collect. And there's just a mock-up of a digital twin. There's quite a lot of different options here. So on the left-hand side, you've got the data. So that's the farm platform data. Then it communicates to the twin, so which is the virtual farm. In this case, it's based on process-based models. That's the engine room of the forecasting system. Because they can take a long time to run, in this case, we emulate those process-based models using machine learning models. Then we update the forecast as data comes in through the sensors or through remote sensing, say, and then we can do forecasts that continually update, but only update at the scale of the decision process. It doesn't need to update in real time, it needs to update in right time, in an ideal time. And then we always need to quantify uncertainties here. So it's an updating system on forecasts, and then you have sort of a visualization where you can look at informed and timely decision making. And importantly, then we need to complete the loop where you can do adaptive recording and monitoring design. That's where you sort of you maybe sort of turn off some of your sensors or place some more sensors in and put them in the right place, or just measure at the right time. And so that's digital twins. So that's basically the idea of that. That's a summary of where we are with the farm platform, what we've been doing. And here's a slide summarizing it. So established in 2010, 4 farms, open facility. We've got all this sensing capacity. It can be used as a test bed for new sensors and AI methodologies. We've got good process-based model capacity, data-driven model capacity too, but not as good as the process-based model. We can demonstrate digital twins. We've got data for all major farm processes. So we're part of the Ecological Continuity Trust. We've also got environmental change network sites within the farm platform, and we're also part of the global farm platform. So there's plenty of opportunities for reanalysis with our data sets. We're open for business or project co-development, and we do a lot of student training. Right, so that's where we are. So the next couple of slides will be on the challenges. Data challenges, quite considerable really, because you measure everything. So this slide here, we don't have to look at detail in this slide. So the yellow collections are all automated. They go straight to the cloud. The grey collections got the possibility to be automated, whereas the orange collections are all manual. So basically, half our collections have got some sort of manual input, which requires a lot of resources to collect. Also note they're all at different spatial units, different temporal units, and they also started at different times, depending when we installed the equipment, basically depending on when we had the money to install the equipment. So this is the challenges of our data sets. They weren't all in place from day one, all at the same spatial resolution or temporal resolution. So that presents a challenge. We do some provide some pre-processing tools to help those challenges, as say in filling, aggregation, and so forth. So some examples there. Data release challenges. Now this is considerable actually. We've got to collect all this data, we've got to quality control it, and then we've got to release it. We've also got to release it in quite a timely manner. So some collections take about a year to process and release. Some collections are more timely, say 2 or 3 months. No collection is immediate. So considering that we've got all those component process to release, that requires quite considerable resource. Just a summary of where we are of our open data performance in take-up, I suppose. So most of our registrations for the data portal are external, 72%. Downloads is more internal, 60%. And in experiments, at least one external collaborator is 46%. So we get good external use, which is important for our funding. Resource challenges. Now here's an organogram of the farm platform, and that's all those skill sets are required to keep the farm platform running. So the blue squares are the fundamental science. The green square is more the operational of the farm. The orange ones are a mixture of data collection and digital science, and then the purple ones are core digital science. So we've got to bring all these skill sets together to keep the farm platform running. Sometimes we're strong in some components of those skill sets, sometimes we're not. So sometimes things sort of drop off a bit, simply because we haven't got the staff in place. People leave and move on, and sometimes we're strong. So this is an ongoing challenge of our collections. Just as an aside there, our collections are always better the more engagement we get from usage. Usage improves the quality of our data collections. System change challenges. So we've gone through 2 system changes so far, and we're due another one. We need to decide what to do. So we're not sure what to do yet. There's a few things on the table, and that they're listed there. We could just simply stay as is. It's a lot cheaper. But we need to do. We're sort of been learning as we go along with these system changes. You need quite a lot of money to ensure you've got the right data just before and just after the system change. Sample the right things, collect the right data things, so we understand what happens across the system changes. So that's a challenge, and that's due for next year. But the last few slides, we've got to ensure the farm platform has a strong connectivity, both with academia, with the farmers, and with policy. We're really good with academia. That's a sort of strong point, I think. I think we connect with other institutes, we connect with UK universities, not only through projects, but also through a lot of student training. And we do a considerable amount of that, especially in AI techniques, because we've got such a rich data resource now. It's ideal for machine learning and deep learning models. And we've got some international links there. Connectivity with farmers. So we've got connectivity with the Environmental Farmers Group. So over 1,000 commercial farmers. So it's important that they're in the loop. So we've got that connectivity, and we connect with policy as an example with the environmental improvement plan. So that's important, our connectivity. We've got to make sure the farm platform is always relevant. We can't just continue to collect data about relevance. And that's it. And that's where we are based, in that nice house there.
Great, thank you very much, Harry. So just a reminder, all the questions are going to be after the second presentation. So any questions, please put them into the chat box or question box by 1:20. So I'd like to introduce our second presenter, who's Dr. Catherine Broomfield. So she's a member of Pasture for Life and a board member since 2022. So she has farmed 100% pasture-fed beef and sheep as part of an integrated nature-friendly farming system on our farm in Devon, and then she's also turned this to applied research in academia. So after completing her PhD in sociology of agriculture in 2024, she joined the Center for Rural Policy Research at the University of Exeter, and her main research interest is understanding the factors that influence farming's relationship with wider society. So I'll pass over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks to you, ECT and the BS Cubed for inviting me to be here as part of today's webinar. In terms of just introducing again, who I am. Obviously, many hats. There's top picture there. There's my livestock farm in Devon, and as you say, a board member of Pasture Life from 2022, as well as being a social scientist at the Centre of Rural Policy Research. And obviously my interests there are very much in relation to the social science dimension, which may seem slightly separate from this conversation today, but in terms of farming's place in society, the sort of data that we're talking about today that's coming out of particularly the area that I'm going to speak on, which is staying with the North Wyke Farm Platform, is really crucial to that, actually. So there is a very strong link between those two sort of sides of the coin. But I'm going to really focus, as a farmer, I should say, over the past 16 years, I've had a very strong link one way or another with Rothamsted, both at North Wyke and Rothamsted Research more generally. My understanding of Rothamsted and my position at PFL, it brought together PFL, Rothamsted, to talk about how to make, more, get the understanding of the impact of the data coming out of North Wyke Farm Platform to the end user, to the farmer, and perhaps by effectively embedding me in North Wyke over a period of months to do a sort of farmer-facing synthesis of that. And it's that project which was called Sustainable Pasture-Fed Systems, Unifying Science and Practice, that I'm going to talk to you mostly about today. Yeah, so that sets the scene really, and probably I would say is my way of saying that I'm probably more a jack of all trades in a room of deep experts. So I thought I'd just get my excuses in early. Let's move on to the next slide. Thank you. So a little bit about Pasture for Life as an organisation. I mean, we are a research-led peer-to-peer learning community of farmers. And I think the crucial thing about Pasture for Life is, first of all, our ethos of collaboration with all those in that sort of community of interest around sustainable land use, farming and food systems, particularly with academics. So that's our research-led perspective. We really want to work with academics and we do work all the time with academics to objectively understand the impact of pasture-based livestock at the systems level. And the other thing to say is that the 100% pasture-fed system of PFL is only one part, and that is mainly delivered through certification. We have a certification process for farmers who want to sell their produce certified as 100% pasture fed. There's a much bigger part of our mission which is around the learning and practice, and that involves a community of, a broad church of all types of farmers involved in some way or another with livestock or wanting to incorporate livestock. But what they share in common is that they're all at different starting points, but with a common interest in moving towards lower input farming, and wherever they want to go on that journey. It needn't necessarily end up with 100% pasture fed. Next slide, thanks. And it's never more needed, arguably. Livestock farming is at a crossroads in the UK. I think it's might be even better described as at a spaghetti junction. There is, a whole basket full of change and uncertainty that farmers are facing, including obviously the policy change that farming's still going through since we exited the EU. And to that we can add a whole host of geopolitical volatilities, social and climate change, and it's leaving livestock farming in particular in a very strained and stressed position. Okay, next slide. And yet, grasslands are a key lever for change. Going back to what Harry said, it's such a massive part of grasslands is such a massive part of our farm landscape in the UK as well as other parts of the world. And I won't go through this slide in terms of what the contributions are potentially. I think the argument's probably pretty well understood to this audience, but I think what it is really highlights is that the work of Rothamsted is really central to teasing out how grassland farming with livestock can be more resilient, but also the contributions that it can make and how it can sort of maximize those contributions and mitigate some of the issues it's facing. And particularly when we look at grassland, the huge contribution in terms of climate sequestration, greenhouse gas sequestration, carbon sequestration below ground, which is often less visible, I think, in the public discourse than those actions that can be taken above ground. So I think Rothamsted's work at North Wyke has been really important in highlighting, yes, the importance of regenerative farming practices to restoring degraded soils in arable settings, but also the importance of maintaining farming systems that conserve immense carbon stocks held in long-term undisturbed permanent pasture. So if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, and it was with this all in mind that we embarked together on a short collaborative project with UK RI BBSRC impact funding last year. Myself and other key protagonists were Nikki Yoxwell from Pasture for Life, Dr. Steve Emery and Mel Wright at Rothamsted, with significant contributions throughout the project from a scientific advisory board pulled together at Rothamsted, North Wyke and the Pasture for Life research group, which is part of our sort of governance structure at PFL. And the objectives were to produce a farmer-facing synthesis of Rothamsted's research relevant to the debate around pasture-based livestock systems. And the reason for that was really speaking to this point that there is this wealth of data that's generated by North Wyke and other sites involved in long-term experiments. It's just making sure that that data is impactful to the user community, to farmers, that it comes out in a timely manner, and that it is translated to in ways that really, you know, can be applied by the farmer and understood. And in also doing that synthesis, we wanted to sort of look at farmers' priorities for research in terms of uncertainty and knowledge gaps in the research. If you just click next. And that was quite a task that I principally was faced in terms of doing that, because you think about Rothamsted, North Wyke, and vast canon of data that they have as to, you know, where do you start, how do you bound this? So just to explain a sort of our methodological approach, we basically looked at triangulating three factors. One was the sort of key issues in the public discourse around farming livestock. The other was looking at Rothamsted's, North Wyke's historic and present core areas of research, as well as future areas of research, because we really wanted to look at the data, what was the data telling us from what has already been collected or is ongoing, but also that can be built on, so areas that are still sort of in the strategic plan. And we also were fortunate that in 2023, Pasture for Life's research technical director Nikki Yoxwell led a mapping exercise to look at the research that had been done in relation to its certification protocol as a means to identify key areas of uncertainty and knowledge gaps. And so in that way, we came up with our kind of process for doing the synthesis and for sort of bounding it in some way. And if we go to the next slide. I don't want you to try and read this even. I just put it up as a really annoying slide. But really the point of it is to I mean, this is just one page of the digest, and just to show the amount of farmer relevant research that came out of the synthesis. And that was actually just from 2000 to the present, as well as looking at some of the ongoing research. So yeah, there's a lot there, and not all of it sort of reaches the ears of the farming community, despite you know a lot of connection, as Harry said, with the farming community. It's still always an ongoing task, I think, to try and really make this farmer relevant and farmer facing in terms of how this data is presented. And if you go to the next slide. I'm going to skip over this just because of time today, but this was the other half, if you like, of the work that we did, which was in a way sort of looking, when you get the sort of the you see the data, it is also, if you like, frames the gaps in the data and areas for priorities. And we can come back to this if there's time and interest. But this was one part of that, which gives us, if you like, a jumping off point for Rothamsted to think about and to collaborate with not just PFL but all sorts of farming organisations to think about where you go forward from here. And one of those things, just to highlight something that Harry was talking about, which was heartening to hear, was this cross-cutting theme of resilience of the farming practice and within the whole system. So, what do these interventions do? What are the impacts of certain practices in relation to grassland systems and systems with livestock that help actual resilience? Because this is really came out of a workshop we did as part of this project with farmers as a key area to think about, to factor in when we think about designing research. Okay, so thank you very much. Go to the next slide. So now I'm going to just pick out a few key areas, highlights, if you like, in relation to that exercise that we did. Both, and this is my kind of categorization, so crudely put, but looking at those key highlights of data that really resonate with the farming priorities in relation to the data that came out of directly from the farm platform, and also there was some data that came out of experiments more than 6 years at Rothamsted North Wyke, which we're going to call farmer-led LTEs, in that they sort of started from a position of the farmers working collaboratively on funding to sort of, if you like, design the project much more in that kind of driving seat role. So I want to look at those two things, and these are the a farmer-facing digest, so it may not speak directly in relation to research around soils. It all tracks back to soil because everything does in the end. But let's just talk you through a couple of these main key areas. So I think one of the first areas was this, the work that Rothamsted has pioneered in relation to taking a new nutritional value approach to assessing land use efficiency of human edible food, and in doing this, showing that pasture-based ruminant livestock systems can, in certain settings, obviously not we're not saying it's everywhere, but they can represent more efficient land use, certainly than supplementary feed-intensive livestock systems, and they can have a lower overall greenhouse gas emissions footprint when you look at the life cycle analysis in this way than feed-intensive beef or pork or poultry type systems. And it is really highlighted that the value in terms of sustainable and resilient farming, the role of rain-fed pasture-based grazing livestock in producing nutrient-dense food whilst enabling the conservation of significant carbon stocks in permanent pastures. And I think that has also, there's work that has done which focuses around the systems change that took place on the farm platforms, I think was about 2019, where one of the farm platforms was changed from a high sugar grass to arable, I think wheat, with a linked fourth housed system. And the work that Rothamsted there really has been very important, I think, for the farming community, for the public, for the policymakers in highlighting the complexity and unintended consequences of converting grassland grazed by livestock to arable, particularly in settings which have heavy soil combined with high rainfall, which isn't just the setting that can be described at North Wyke, of course, but is widely shared by nearly all the main livestock farming regions in the UK. Increased environment risk of soil runoff into watercourses from arable, especially bare soil, and the climate impact, again, of releasing these carbon stocks in soil. And also the challenge in terms of sustainable low input farming of producing human edible food to a comparable nutritional value from grasslands as meat. I think that was from this farmer facing point of view, that has been really game-changing data that's come out of the Rothamsted farm platforms. And I think another point was the benefit of pasture management and grazing systems on above and below ground biodiversity and health. So in that regard, what Rothamsted's research over a period of time, over lots of analysis of data coming out of those farm platforms, has been the value of permanent pasture in terms of having, really high soil organic carbon, and compared to reseeded tilled pasture, nitrogen, earthworms, and fungal biomass. And the relationship between nitrogen in the soil levels and soil carbon and the herbage, micronutrient herbage quality above ground was another factor which is obviously really important to farmers looking at these more sustainable and resilient systems. But also what the data from a place like North Wyke also does is, cumulatively with all these instrumentations and looking at the systems temporally over time and within the whole farming cycle, it adds a huge degree of nuance. So we also see, we see what the benefits are, but we also understand that it's not a given, that it all depends on good management decisions. Nutrient loss can also be greatest from permanent pasture, for example. So the importance of understanding how to avoid compaction generally, and the precision or even nil use of inorganic inputs to nutrient cycling is also factors that have really been highlighted by Rothamsted's long-term experiments. And I think one of the things about the long-term experiment data is that it highlights that, as always with land, site specifics are everything. You can't have, a crude sort of discourse or decision making about how to have resilient and sustainable farming systems without understanding, the context of place. So if you just move on, I'll be finishing very shortly. I know we're very close to time. One of the other things I just really want to talk about was another aspect that came out of the synthesis, which was the actual impact of the data coming out of farmer-led experiments in collaboration with Rothamsted at North Wyke. This one I highlight here is a cell grazing versus set stocking experiment that is ongoing, and they made a report on findings at an interim point of 7 years, I think last year, or perhaps the year before. I think it was last year. And that really came out with some very impactful findings. That that experiment was designed with a farming led collaboration, and it really shows, I think critically, one of the main things that it found was that cell grazing or mob grazing pasture compared to the set stocking control, both of those sites started off with exactly the same management at the beginning of the experiment, and then over the period of years, the cell grazing had increased its carrying capacity to about 145% of the set stocking pasture, and it's very interesting that it also was found to have achieved that without a trade-off in soil structure that you might have thought about in relation to compaction perhaps, and also there was no relative increase in levels of nutrients in water runoff. It also has found over those years that there's been increased regrowth and extended grazing seasons on the cell grazing compared to set stocking, which leads to earlier turnout and extended grazing season, and surmising that that's due to increased root activity. And ongoing, I think there will be also further consideration of its resilience in terms of particularly drought. But it does appear that it is more, the cell grazing pasture has become more resilient, potentially because of that enhanced root growth, than the set stocking. So we seem to have gone back on a slide. I don't know why that is. Have I been pressing buttons? Yeah, okay, all right. I'm going to leave it there. I was going to highlight another farmer-led project with Rothamsted, but we can talk about that another time. If I can just go to my final reflections. So I think, some of the questions that came out of this project, working with Pasture for Life's research group, with the scientists at North Wyke, and also we had a farmer workshop at Rothamsted where we presented the digest. They'd actually seen it before, and we had discussions about these issues of uncertainty and gaps going forward. And some of the key sort of reflections came out was how to optimize the long-term experiments in a future full of uncertainty and change from a farming perspective. And is there something that is optimal beyond, this sort of fairly dichotomized, often discussion about, is it academic-led or is it farmer-led research? And if you could just press click one more time and one more time again. So I think there's real strengths in the long-term experiments on the North Wyke Farm Platform. I think in a highly volatile context that we're in, our reflections very much were that we really need, if you like, full-fat scientist-farmer collaboration. And so my reflections are really, the Pasture for Life reflections are really that maybe to fully realise the benefits of long-term experiments at North Wyke and other sites, it is ever more important to collaborate with farmers at the earliest design stage of LTEs to ensure the right questions and realistic conditions are established at the outset. I think there's always opportunity because the tendency, I think, is really to not always bring that in at that first instance where you say, well, what is this study about? What are the design criteria? And I think that it would be really helpful to always think about bringing farmers into that at the earliest stage. And also how to harness the sort of responsive sort of farmers' pragmatic innovation, if you like. There's a lot of discussion at the workshop about innovation always being kind of shiny. That was the word that was used all the time. Farmers have a much more pragmatic, I think, approach to innovation, in that it's sort of often opportunistic, or sort of, just see what works, or, comes out of sort of an embedded sort of experiential knowledge. So I think there's also a question for how farmers can be brought in, not just as recipients of the knowledge generated at LTA sites, but as contributors to the further development and site management aspirations. And these were some really sort of key things that came out of the work we've been doing over the months, and also we took the digest to Groundswell, and that was very well received, and a similar discussion took place at Groundswell around these issues. And I think, you know, Harry's now sort of pointing out, highlighting that the farm platform is due for another sort of review of systems and treatments, and so this is a really important juncture where, you know, we can see, you know, how do we move forward in a way that really makes sure that the very, you know, in-depth and impactful research that comes out of long-term experiments uniquely can really be translated into to maximum impact at the user interface. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Catherine. We've had 3 excellent talks on the value of long-term experiments. I appreciate we are past the actual meeting time. What we'll do is we will stay on just to do some questions. If anyone's left or is about to leave, thank you very much for joining us. But I'll just pass a few questions over to the speakers now. I'm going to start off with one from Mohammed Rizwan. He was the first person to ask a question, and it's highly relevant in terms of the practical benefits, I think, of some of these long-term experiments. So he's framed his question in terms of drought and also excess rainfall frequency within Pakistan, which is something that happens all over the world. They've had both floods and drought within 1 year. How can long-term field experiments provide data that, first of all, can support them in either creating climate resilient crops or selecting them, or also in better soil management practices in such regions? And I will pass over to Paul first, or to Harry, sorry.
Yeah, I suppose it's the judgment call ultimately, where we can transfer long-term experiments, the data and the outputs from long-term experiments elsewhere to that region. Ideally, you want a long-term experiment in that region. But of course, it doesn't cover a long-term experiment for a couple of years, for a number of years. That's the challenge. Yeah, ultimately, it's a judgment call. You can learn from the setup, though. You can learn from the management and stuff like that. But and how long-term experiments have been run around the world. But it's a judgment call. It's choosing the right long-term experiment. There are quite a lot around the world that may be suitable.
And I'll pass it to Catherine too, and just rephrase part of it. That you mentioned about climate resilience and the effects of flooding and whatever else. When you're looking at the results from some of your experiments, how do they transfer into understanding how climate change may affect farming within the UK and possibly the transferability of that data elsewhere?
Yeah, I think to Paul's point, you know, and going back to that point about it's all to do with sort of site specifics. There is a limit. There's a limit to how much you can sort of take long-term experiments in a temperate setting like we have in the UK, and how that translates. But I think certainly within the UK, I mean, you know, just going back to the last project I talked about, you know, that has really had some. I think there's more to come, actually. I think on the climate side, it's only just sort of beginning. But there's so much that can be that is really directly farmers can take and apply in terms of understanding what their grazing management practices are doing to the resilience below ground of that grazing land, but also that feeds into their whole farming system. But so I think that kind of you know, that kind of experimental situation that you have on farm platforms is really translatable to the sort of questions farmers in the UK are facing now, not just to drought but also to high rainfall, which, you know. So and I also think there's just one other element to bring into this, which is the sort of, if we think about the sort of the bifurcation of farming in the UK, where we've got sort of arable farming on the east and livestock-based farming on the west, and just looking at an organisation such as Rothamsted, I think it's potentially got so much to contribute in bringing together its expertise at North Wyke and elsewhere, at Harpenden, to understand what that integrated farming system looks like, which incorporates livestock into arable systems, and how that is going to affect resilience of the system in all aspects, but also very much in relation to climate.
I got another point here. Increasingly, the farm platform's used as ground reference for remote sensing studies. So you can translate the models that we developed there elsewhere, because remote sensing is available everywhere. Satellite remote sensing.
I'm just going to ask one more question, just in the interest of time, and it's taken from what Daniel Baird asked, which was in relation to solar farms, but relates to soil monitoring just in general. So there's a huge call right now from European Union and also in the UK for improved soil monitoring. People are coming up with loads of soil health indicators, describing how you can look at a field. Both of you showed, and also Ben showed, just the considerable amount of data that you're collecting from all these different sites. When you look at the breadth of what you're collecting, what do you think is needed in terms of soil monitoring to make sure that we're managing soils effectively, and to make sure that policies are being implemented effectively as well, taking into account how much it costs to do soil monitoring too? So can we just go ahead and measure soil carbon, or do we have to do a lot more, and do we have to do as much as you're doing at these research experiments? So I'll pass it to Harry first, and then to Catherine.
Yeah. Well, we do quite a lot already, so I don't really have any comments on what additionally soil monitoring we should do, because it does depend on resources. So that's a challenge. But what I would say about agrivoltaics, it is grid connectivity dependent. So we've done a scoping study on this, and we can only deploy solar panels in half of one field that will have connectivity to the grid. So it's very limited for us to put solar panels. So you can't put them everywhere. It does depend on grid connectivity.
Okay, Catherine, do you have any comments on what we should be measuring, not just about solar, but just about soils in general, and to make sure they're being managed effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going to the point about having a universal system for doing it, I know that there is efforts afoot by organisations who are involved in doing soil monitoring, to make sure that they're offering systems that are sort of standard, common format, and I think that is really important. I think I do think we need to measure much more than just soil carbon. I think the kind of measurements that came out of the Rothamsted data, all those are really, really critical, important measurements to farmers. They've got to be presented in a way that is a useful decision-making tool for farmers. But I think they are all important. I think also, we look at the agri-environment schemes, the new generation of schemes that are applying in the UK, currently under somewhat of a sort of a reset. But I think there's a massive opportunity there, just sort of looking at it more widely, that one of the actions that can be taken with those screen systems is soil monitoring, and really to think about how we can utilize all that data that's collected in a sort of standardized way, and hold that data in an organized way, create a database which is fed by those farmers doing their soil monitoring activity as part of their agri-environment schemes. And I don't think, I just think we're probably missing a bit of a trick at the moment, in that not seeing the benefit of that data is massive, both to government and also to industry. And I think that's an area we could be doing a lot more on.
And that last point is really pertinent about having the data available. And last question, Ben, I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot, a bit like Dragon's Den, but if you look at the ECT over its lifetime, what's been the most impactful output from having the ECT in place?
Oh gosh, I would say saving several experiments that would otherwise have probably gone to the wall and closed long ago through our role in mediating and championing them and helping PIs and institutions to succession plan. I think I would, if we weren't here, I think the UK would have lost a lot more experiments than it has. And if there's time, Paul, I had an addendum to Mohammed's question, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Mohammed might want to look at our website because I can point to at least 3 enhanced rainfall and droughting long-term experiments in the UK, including the world's longest running climate change experiment at Buxton, that may give him some pointers on design, despite the question that Harry and Catherine have answered about how that translates to the Pakistan context. But if he wants to look at those experiments, I'm sure he could learn something. So the Buxton, there's the raindrop experiment in Oxfordshire, and particularly the Cors Fochno experiment in mid Wales. And these have all been running for at least 10 years, and in Buxton's case, 33 years.
Great. Thanks very much, Ben. And thank you to all the speakers today. So thank you, Ben Sykes, Paul Harris, and Catherine Broomfield. You've really demonstrated the value of long-term experiments and also the importance of the Ecological Continuity Trust in preserving these resources and also for disseminating information from them and gaining public support as well. So thank you to everyone for attending. At the end of the webinar, there will be a quick feedback survey. So please take your time to complete this. It helps us to develop future activities. The recording of this webinar will also be available after the event on our YouTube channel. And I just want to highlight that we've got an upcoming annual conference and also early career conference being held in December. And the call for abstracts is still open. It is open until the 31st of August, which happens to be Sunday. So if you like your weekend, please prepare an abstract and submit it by Friday. The conferences are being held first week of December in Manchester, and the theme is Resilient Soils for Sustainable Future. So hopefully we get a chance to see many of you there. And also we'll be joined there by ECT, who are going to be delivering their own session as well. So the next webinar is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 3rd of September, on soils through agriculture, restoration, and agroforestry. And it's being led by another one of our corporate members, which is Cranfield University. And more details will be in a follow-up email and on the BS Cubed website as well. So I hope to see you at future events. In the meantime, thank you again for attending, and goodbye.